Suddenly, a woman insults Sandra Bullock in the first-class lounge. Keanu Reeves' reaction shocks everyone. Sandra Bullock sighed as she settled into the plush leather chair of the exclusive first-class lounge at LAX. She had just wrapped up a grueling press tour, and all she wanted was a quiet moment with her coffee before boarding her flight. Across from her, Keanu Reeves lounged casually, flipping through a book. They had been friends for years, their bond forged through speed and strengthened by time. He glanced up, giving her his usual gentle smile. Just then, a woman in a designer suit strutted past, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She stopped abruptly in front of Sandra and scoffed. "Oh, wow," the woman sneered. "I can't believe they let just anyone in here now. I mean, some people just don't belong in first-class lounges." Sandra blinked, taken aback. She wasn't sure if the woman knew who she was, or if it was just some random, unwarranted hostility. The room fell into an awkward silence. Other travelers glanced over, sensing tension in the air. Before Sandra could even react, Keanu calmly shut his book, set it on the table and stood up. His towering frame and composed presence made the woman hesitate for just a second. Then, in a voice both smooth and cutting, he said, "I think you might be lost. The rude and entitled section is outside." The woman's face turned red. "Excuse me?" Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I use words that were too big?" He smiled, but there was an unmistakable steel beneath it. "See, Sandra is a legend, and you're just someone who mistook arrogance for class." The woman huffed, her lips curling in irritation, but the entire lounge was now staring at her. A few people even nodded in approval at Keanu's words. Realizing she had lost whatever twisted game she was trying to play, she spun on her heel and stormed away. Sandra let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Keanu, you didn't have to do that." Keanu shrugged, picking up his book again. "Sure I did. No one gets to insult America's sweetheart in front of me." Sandra smirked, raising her coffee cup in a toast. "Well then, Mr. Reeves, my hero, I owe you a drink on this flight." Keanu chuckled, raising his own cup in return. "Deal." And with that, the tension in the lounge melted away, replaced by the quiet admiration of those who had just witnessed Keanu Reeves do what he did best, being effortlessly cool. The end. What do you think? Want any changes or more drama? Sure. Here's what happens next. Suddenly, a woman insults Sandra Bullock in the first-class lounge. Keanu Reeves' reaction shocks everyone. Part 2. Sandra and Keanu boarded their flight soon after, still chuckling about the lounge incident. They settled into their first-class seats, side by side, as the flight attendants prepared for takeoff. "Do you get that kind of treatment often?" Keanu asked, buckling his seatbelt. Sandra sighed. "More than I'd like to admit. Some people assume that just because you're an actor, you either don't belong or you're full of yourself." Keanu smirked. Clearly she didn't know who she was messing with. Sandra nudged him playfully. "Oh, and what if she had insulted you instead?" Keanu pretended to think for a moment. "I would have just smiled and offered her my seat." Sandra rolled her eyes. "Of course you would. You're too nice for your own good." The flight took off smoothly, and soon the cabin crew came around with drinks. Sandra reminded Keanu of their deal, ordering a fine glass of red wine for him and a cocktail for herself. Just as they clinked their glasses together, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Oh, you have to be kidding me." Both turned to see her, the rude woman from the lounge, now standing in the aisle just a few rows behind them. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, you two are actually sitting here?" "In first class." Sandra exchanged a look with Keanu, barely hiding her amusement. "Where else would we be? The cargo hold?" The woman scoffed. I just thought you were joking when you said she was a legend." She turned to Keanu with narrowed eyes. "I knew you looked familiar, but wait, you're Keanu Reeves." Keanu gave her a small polite nod, sipping his wine. The woman's face went pale. "Oh my God," she clutched her designer purse. I'm a huge fan of yours. I loved you in John Wick and The Matrix. I didn't recognize you before." Sandra watched as realization dawned on the woman's face. Now that she knew who they were, her arrogance had transformed into awkward flattery. Keanu set down his glass. "That's the funny thing about respect," he said coolly. "It shouldn't be based on whether someone's famous or not." The woman's lips parted, but no words came out. Sandra smiled sweetly. "Enjoy your flight." Humiliated, The woman quickly shuffled back to her seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Sandra leaned toward Keanu, whispering, "I swear, I love it when you do that." Keanu chuckled. "What call people out?" Sandra grinned. "No, just be effortlessly you." The two clinked their glasses again, laughter bubbling between them as the plane soared into the sky. The end. Or is it? I hope you like this continuation. Want to add another twist like turbulence or a mystery passenger? Suddenly, a woman insults Sandra Bullock in the first-class lounge. Keanu Reeves' reaction shocks everyone. Part 4. As Sandra settled into her new seat next to Keanu in economy, she stretched her legs, well, tried to stretch them. "Okay, I take it back," she muttered. "First class is pretty nice." Keanu chuckled. "Regretting your decision already?" Sandra grinned. "Nah, sitting next to you is more entertaining than any luxury seat." A few passengers around them had begun whispering excitedly, realizing that two Hollywood legends were suddenly in economy class. A teenage girl across the aisle gasped and nudged her friend. "Is that Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves?" Keanu noticed and gave them a polite nod. The girls practically melted in their seats. Just then, a flight attendant appeared, looking flustered but excited. "Mr. Reeves, Miss Bullock, I just wanted to say thank you. That was incredible. You really didn't have to give up your seats." Keanu smiled. "It's all good." Sandra leaned in. "But now that we're here, how about some peanuts? Maybe a blanket?" The flight attendant grinned. "You got it." She rushed off, leaving a few more passengers gawking at the famous duo. Keanu turned to Sandra. "So what's the longest flight you've ever been on?" She groaned. "LA to Australia." "Brutal." Keanu smirked. "Think you can handle 6 hours back here?" Sandra narrowed her eyes playfully. "Are you challenging me?" Keanu took a sip of water. "Maybe." A mysterious passenger. Just as Sandra was about to fire back a witty remark, a different energy filled the air. A man in a dark hoodie sitting a few rows ahead of them was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. He kept glancing around, muttering under his breath. Keanu, always alert, subtly noticed. Sandra leaned over. "You see that?" she whispered. Keanu nodded. "Yeah, something's off." The man stood up suddenly and walked toward the restroom, only to pause near the cockpit door. His hand hovered near the handle. A sinking feeling hit Sandra. "Keanu!" Keanu was already unclipping his seatbelt. A flight attendant noticed too. "Sir, you can't stand there." The man hesitated, then muttered, "Sorry," before heading into the restroom instead. Keanu sat back down, but his sharp eyes didn't leave the door. Sandra took a slow breath. "So, do we pretend that was normal, or do we assume we're in an action movie now?" Keanu gave her a sideways glance. "Depends. Want to be my co-star?" Sandra smirked. "Always." A few minutes later, the man emerged from the restroom, his hands twitching. He walked past them, his eyes darting around the cabin. Keanu and Sandra exchanged looks. Then the worst thing happened. Turbulence. The plane shook violently, sending trays and drinks spilling. A few passengers gasped. The pilot's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated." Sandra gripped her armrest. "Okay, this just turned into speed at 30,000 feet. Keanu stayed calm, but he was watching the man. The guy had jumped at the turbulence, gripping his hoodie tightly like he was hiding something. Keanu leaned toward Sandra. "Stay here." "Excuse me? You think I'm just going to sit here while you go play John Wick?" Keanu gave her a look. She rolled her eyes. "Fine, but if this turns into an actual fight scene, I'm not missing it." Keanu stood up casually and walked toward the restroom where the man had been. Sandra, unable to resist, whispered to the teenage girl next to her, "Hey, if he starts doing fight moves, record it." The girl nodded furiously. Keanu reached the back of the plane and waited. A moment later, the hooded man returned, only to freeze when he saw Keanu standing there. "Hey," Keanu said casually, "everything okay?" The man's eyes darted around. Yeah, just nervous flying." Keanu tilted his head. "That's fair, but you seem more than nervous." The man swallowed hard. I just don't like turbulence." Keanu studied him for a moment. Then in his usual calm, intimidatingly cool voice, he asked, "What's in your pocket?" The man's face lost all color. Sandra, still in her seat, whispered, oh my God, what if it's a bomb?" The teenage girl whispered back, "What if it's just like gum?" Keanu didn't break eye contact with the man. You can tell me, he said, softer this time, or you can tell the air marshal in the cockpit. The man's breath came out shaky. Then slowly, he pulled his hand from his hoodie pocket and revealed a wedding ring. Keanu blinked. Sandra from her seat groaned, "Oh my God." The man exhaled. I was gonna propose to my girlfriend when we land, but I'm so nervous I keep checking the ring every 5 seconds, and now I look like a psycho. Keanu stared for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. "Well," he said, patting the guy's shoulder, "for future reference, maybe don't lurk near the cockpit door." The man cringed. "Yeah, I see that now." Keanu nodded toward his seat. "Go sit down. Good luck with the proposal." The guy hurried off, still looking embarrassed. Sandra called out, "Hey, buddy." The guy turned. Sandra smirked. "If she says no, I will find her and talk some sense into her." Laughter rippled through the cabin. Even the rude businessman from before cracked a small grin. Keanu returned to his seat, shaking his head. "Well, that was dramatic." Sandra grinned. "So what'd we learn today?" Keanu smirked. "That economy class is way more exciting than first class." They clinked their drinks again as the plane soared on, leaving behind an unforgettable story for everyone on board. The end. Did you love that twist? Want to add more craziness, maybe a secret agent reveal? Let me know. Ha ha! Suddenly, a woman insults Sandra Bullock in the first-class lounge. Keanu Reeves' reaction shocks everyone. Part 5. The plane had settled back into a smooth cruise after the unexpected turbulence. Passengers who had been rattled were now easing back into their in-flight routines. Sandra and Keanu, still in economy, were enjoying their drinks when the teenage girl across the aisle leaned in. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves," she whispered, starstruck but polite. Keanu turned to her with his signature warm smile. "Yeah?" She hesitated before blurting out, "Are you like always this cool?" Sandra snorted into her drink. "Oh, trust me, kid, he's a dork." Keanu smirked at her. "That's Mr. Dork to you." The girl giggled. "Seriously, though, you guys just made this the best flight ever." Keanu nodded. "Well, I'm glad we could help." Sandra leaned toward the girl with a mock conspiratorial tone. "Want to know a secret?" The girl's eyes widened. "Yes." Sandra grinned. "I once beat Keanu at a motorcycle race." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Lies." Sandra leaned back with a smug expression. "You'll never prove it." Before Keanu could argue, a new voice interrupted. "Excuse me." Sandra and Keanu turned to see an older gentleman in a sharp suit standing in the aisle. He had the air of someone important, but carried himself with humility. "I just wanted to say," he glanced at both of them with genuine admiration. "I saw what you did, giving up your seats, showing kindness. It's rare to see that these days." Sandra waved it off playfully. We just like making things interesting." The man chuckled. "Well, as the actual owner of this airline, I'd like to offer you both lifetime first-class privileges." The entire cabin gasped. Sandra's mouth dropped open. "Wait, what?" Keanu, ever cool, simply smiled. "That's very generous." The airline owner nodded. "It's well-deserved." He then turned to leave, but before he walked away, he added with a wink, "And by the way, I do believe Sandra beat you in that race." Keanu groaned as Sandra burst into victorious laughter. The teenage girl across the aisle whispered, "Best flight ever." Sandra, still grinning, leaned back into her seat. "Well, Keanu, guess that means next time we can sit in first class." Keanu smirked, sipping his drink. "Only if we don't get kicked out again for being too interesting." They laughed as the flight continued, their adventure in the skies cemented as yet another legendary Keanu and Sandra moment. The end. Okay, now we've got a feel-good ending. Unless you want one more twist. Maybe an emergency landing or a surprise guest. Let me know.